Okay, class. So for this demo, we are going to go over the muscles of the head and neck. Before we talk about this muscle, make sure that you have reviewed some of the terminologies. For example, what is an origin? What is an insertion? You should know this by now. What is a tendon? And what is an aponeurosis? Okay. So these four terminologies you should have already. Okay. Please refer to the origin insertion list that I have provided to study the origin insertion and action of the skeletal muscles. Okay, so are you ready? Let's go over this. So number one, I'm just going to number this, number one, number two, number three, number four, number five. Okay, so what you can see here, one, we can see orbicularis, oculi. Number two is orbicularis, oris. Number three, we have occipitofrontalis, frontal belly. Number four, temporalis. And number five, we can see at least part of it all throughout here. This is sternocleidomastoid. Okay. Next, here we can see again occipitofrontalis. We can see temporalis right here. We see platysma. Platysma is a critical muscle of facial expression and it's most superficial muscle around the head and neck. So when skin is removed, it's immediately below the skin. So you can see the platysma. Number four, we can also see masseter here. And of course, what we already studied, orbicularis, oculi, and orbicularis, oris. Number seven, we can see right here, through here, sternocleidomastoid, originating from sternum and clavicle and inserting into the mastoid process. Many of these muscles are repeated in these models. So you can see again, occipitofrontalis, frontal belly, orbicularis oculi, orbicularis oris, masseter, sternocleidomastoid, and we can see below here, this is buccinator. Here is enlarged. You can see orbicularis oculi, orbicularis oris. You can see masseter. masseter, and here is this muscle here, right there. Is here. This is buccinator. You can also see part of the sternocleidomastoid. Here, this one, same thing, masseter. You can see buccinator, and I'm not going to repeat the frontal belly, orbicularis oculi, and orbicularis oris. Here we can see something else. You can see masseter, buccinator, and number 3, this. We see temporoparaetalis. Temporoparaetalis. This here, below the temporalis. Temporalis is a pretty thick muscle. This is below that, temporoparaetalis. We can also see the sternocleidomastoid, of course, sternocleidomastoid. And that's about it. Okay. So moving on to the next one. Make sure you have identified the muscles we have studied already. You can see masseter, buccinator, oculi, oris, frontal belly, temporoparaetalis, sternocleidomastoid. Same thing here. Make sure you identify what's identifiable. And here, we get to see splenius capitis here. Okay. So along with the occipitofrontalis, frontal belly, temporoparaetalis, and sternocleidomastoid, oculi, oris, masseter, buccinator, we are also able to see here splenius capitis. Okay, splenius capitis, which is posterior to sternocleidomastoid. Splenius capitis. There are 2 muscles here. This one, and then there's another one. So basically, the superior one is splenius capitis. The inferior one is another one we'll talk about later, levator scapulae. So this is a nice one. Here, you don't really see the occipital belly, but little here. This is the remnant. I won't say it's the whole muscle, but it's the remnant of occipital belly, of occipitofrontalis. Here you can see the splenius capitis. And we are going to talk about this next, trapezius, etc. But this is a good place to study the splenius capitis. And if you're wondering what this muscle is, this is the levator scapulae, which we'll study later. Here you can see the occipital belly. of occipitofrontalis. And you can also see the sternocleidomastoid here and here on both and left and right. Same thing, you can see temporoparietalis. How do you identify temporoparietalis versus temporalis? Is that temporoparietalis is under the temporalis and it's a much smaller muscle. Okay. You can see the occipital belly. Of occipitofrontalis, sternocleidomastoid, right there, splenius capitis, and below that, levator scapulae. There are few more models here. For example, this and this and this. So here, this is what I mean by temporalis versus temporoparietalis. This is clearly temporalis. It's a pretty large muscle. Compare this with this. For this model, I'm going to turn it around a little bit, rotate rather. Okay. So compare that with this. Compare this previous one here with this one here. Notice the difference? This is much smaller. It's triangular, but it's much smaller and it's deeper. This is deeper to the temporalis. So this is what we refer to as temporoparietalis. You can, if you pay attention, you can see the difference between the splenius capitis actually no, you just see the splenius capitis, not the levator scapulae. So identify, this is you can see that this is thicker, temporalis. So identify the muscles in the rest of the models here. So this one, and this one here, basically these models are showing you the same muscles that we already identified. Okay? So make sure you identify the muscles that we discussed so far in these remaining images as well. Okay, that's it. Muscles of the head and neck.